Hi, welcome. This is the second episode of APC Chats. We have with us the founders of Strange Land Brewery here in Austin. A wonderful, I would say beautiful beer because I don't drink beer, but I love this beer. We have Timothy Klatt and Adam Blumenshein, as well as Sunday Vidal, who's my partner and sister. And we're just going to talk about all things startup, kind of the hustle and the not so glamorous, amazing, free life that it is to kind of pursue your own ambition, your own dream. And so welcome, Timothy and Adam.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So talk to us. Tell us about what you do and how you got here and just a little bit about that journey.
Oh, the journey. So my background, I'm basically a serial entrepreneur. I'm a starter. I like to collaborate, partner with somebody. Tim is my partner in Strangeland, and we founded this business looking for the gaps that we saw in the marketplace for beer here in Austin and Central Texas. And we saw this proliferation of the modern beer, and we felt like it was missing character and depth and history and tradition and roots. You could make a case that all beer is rooted in history, and certainly that is the case, but we felt like some of the things that were left behind by the modern brewers were the things that made beer beautiful. The elegance, the depth of flavor, the things that you spoke to drinking our beer, that you felt it was beautiful and other beers don't experience that way for you. So we were looking to create that brand and hoping it would resonate with people, and actually maybe assumed it would resonate too easily with a large group of people. So the hustle and the grind starts there for us. And so Tim and I started the brand 3 years ago, been open for 2.5 years now, and Tim makes all of our beer, and we collaborate on the rest of it.
So my background's in mechanical engineering. I worked for the Air Force for 4 years after graduating from school here in Austin, and I just wanted to make beer for a living, and I got hooked up with Adam, and I was looking for him to help me get an internship somewhere at some brewery in town here, and he had other ideas, so it's all his fault.
I'll take that blame.
Yeah, that's a good thing to be blamed for. Part of what we've seen, even just starting our own business, and just by way of background, it was a website we registered like at 2 a.m. at my mom's house. And when a client asked us to kind of formalize an agency and take away business, and it's a big client, it's like a huge brand, it was like, what? Like, how do we do this? And it's a labor of love. I joke that it's like duct tape and prayers and family favor. How have you guys been received by the market? And what are some of the things that you do to make sure that you stay kind of aligned to vision and mission and just keep opening the doors?
You know, that's an evolving situation for us as the market has changed tremendously in craft beer. When we got in, it was actually a viable model to be draft only, meaning just put your beer in a keg, advertise it by word of mouth, and people are going to buy it and all things are good. But that's not the case anymore. There's, I think I read 189 craft breweries in Texas. We were about 50 at the time when we were starting. So we've had to adjust from a draft-only model, then move over to bombers. It's the large format beers. That's the beers I prefer to drink. They tend to be a little higher in alcohol, more flavor. And then that model has died. Nobody is buying those. Each year you're seeing a third decrease of the marketplace off of that particular style of packaging. So we've had to adjust one more way, and that is in cans. And that's every beer consumed is basically in a can. It's 90+% of the marketplace in package. And what's crazy is Tim and I started from a point of view with that history that we talked about. We naturally condition our beer, meaning it goes into the package flat. The carbonation is created inside the package. And so nobody's ever done that in a can.
Is that why I don't bloat?
That's why you don't bloat. That's right.
Which is why women, I feel like, you just
like
do.
beer,
Yeah. Sorry, that's a little
No,
graphic.
that's great. No, I love it. And there's other benefits to it too that I could geek out on, but for now I'll just stick to how challenging that was for us. Tim and I had to blow some cans up to figure out how to do this. We've spent my kids' tuition and Tim's college tuition for his kids figuring how to put beer in a can flat and then carbonate it, and then have some blow up and figure out what we did wrong or what we should change. And so that's been a really challenging thing. So I'd say that the challenge, maybe I've wandered too far off the question, but you asked, how has the market received us? I think when we have started to perfect the canning, conditioning process, the market is receiving us more and more as we've perfected it. And so we've struggled the first year of being in a package to perfect that in a way that it resonated with the new palates. Because the way we make beer is an old way, but trying to make it modern. And so Tim speaks a lot about that. I'd love Tim to talk about the modern.
And just for the record, this is the place to geek out. We have headsets and microphones, and this is
geek
what you
level
do.
high.
Yeah, geek level high.
Okay, so what do you want me to talk about? Modernity?
Yeah,
Post-modernity?
I think that's a beautiful thing that speaks to who Strangeland is.
Sure. So the name Strangeland comes from Walker Percy, who was an author writing outside of New Orleans in the 1950s. He was a medical doctor. He talked about the melees of modernity. He had prescribed essentially all of 1950s America as full of melees.
Really?
Yeah. And so I wonder I wonder what he would think about, 2017 America. But we thought that was a really fun motif to play on the Strangeland. He had a collection of essays called Signposts in a Strangeland. And we thought bringing that into the beer space would fully root us not only in history, but also modernity, post-modernity, and give us a chance to just kind of play.
So with the name, are you celebrating the melees? Are you trying to kind of make a point, or what is...
I think we're trying to make beer that's relevant and true, not only for ourselves, but also for history.
And not taking the shortcut.
That's right.
Awesome.
And I think that we're trying to diagnose, if you will, the current market environment, if you will. And
so this is the prescription.
What's that?
This is the prescription.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay.
You bet.
Okay. And I guess part of why we wanted to connect with you is just that there's a lot of hype, especially we're in Austin, right? Austin locals. And I'm however long we've been here in the 90s, raising families, raising kids. And then we have this whole universe that just kind of descends on Austin during South by. And there's a lot of pomp. There's a lot of substance at the same time that I think probably gets mistaken as pomp, because there's really good ideas. And just like it's a city that welcomes new thinking and people coming to the table from film and music and interactive and talking about what's next and what are we doing and what have we learned and how are we going to progress. So I celebrate that, because I feel like, in my mind, anytime you have people coming together to talk and discuss what's next and what's new and just be a little vulnerable with that is something to be celebrated. But I feel like it also kind of takes away from some authenticity. And, people don't celebrate the hard as often as they need to. So we wanted to kind of do the juxtaposition of, let's just talk about the dirtiness of startup life, it is kids' tuition, potentially. It is, please make the grades or please get into sports so that somehow you just get to go to college in a way that doesn't, hurt the bank. So I feel like from our position and from our perspective, we want to hear yours of just like, what is that like, and how do you grapple with that to kind of keep moving forward?
So when we started the company, we did what most entrepreneurs do, is you look at an optimistic point of view and assume that things are going to be well received in the marketplace, and then react according if and when they're not as well received. And so we did funding from friends and family, and that got us about a year and a half into our startup, and then we looked for real capital partners to come aside of us. And then when that happens, certainly you are now not a single vision anymore. You're a part of a bigger picture, and your opinion is one of many instead of one of one. And now you're all pulling on this thing, hopefully equally, and so it's more centered. It's like a picture frame. If you all pull at 4 points, it's well framed. If it's one pulling too hard, it's a triangle, and you crop out some important parts of a picture. And so that's what I try to see us do, is from a sales point of view, maybe that's where I'm coming from, and see what the market's going to receive, Tim very likely comes at it from a maker's point of view and tries to make beer that is quality controlled. And we have our capital partners looking at growth and strategy. And within all that, you lose a part of yourself.
Yeah.
You know, like part of Adam had to die inside of Strangeland, because if it didn't, then I was part of the reason Strangeland was going to die.
Yeah.
And so you pick yourself instead of the company.
And is that the part
to
that,
die?
yeah. Is that the part that wants to keep it small?
That's the part that wants to keep it
Yeah.
small. Yeah, that's the part that wants to be a bar, sell to my 427 best friends, and have Austin's version of Cheers,
I was
a
going to
TV
say,
show.
sounds
you know.
amazing.
It's awesome.
We have the warehouse in the back.
Let's do it. The problem is, and we learned pretty soon after starting our business, is that you need, 427,000 people, not 427 people. And so you have to expand your vision, and then that part of yourself that dies should also, when you mature as an entrepreneur, celebrate what the new thing that's created, and softly mourn the death of the thing that died and celebrate the thing that's new. And that's all very hard to do. It's complicated, and you're trusting that the other partners in your business are doing the same thing.
Yeah. Kind of sounds like my relationship issues. I'm like, oh, this is cozy yet very sad.
Do we need to talk?
Maybe not on this moment, but eventually, yeah, probably.
Next podcast.
Yeah.
That's in the 30s.
Because, the joining together of forces or, dreams or ambitions, you do have to kind of take your ego out of it, because some of it is going to be driven by that original idea, but a lot of it has to be morphed in the exchange and then in the reception from a consumer perspective.
Yeah, and I want to talk just for 1 second on the fact that the thing that makes an entrepreneur charge ahead and say yes is the self-confidence and the belief in self.
Yeah.
And then asking that same person to then die, part of themselves die because they don't have all the answers, that's very hard to pull off quickly. And that's why a lot of small businesses fail. I see a lot of people get in the way of their brand, and if they would just open themselves up to other people's influence, a better understanding of what is needed, they could have a successful brand and be happy with what they've created. But it's really hard to ask an entrepreneur to do all that.
Is that where the partnership comes in, Timothy? Do you feel kind of the gut check and the second opinion?
I'm not sure if y'all have picked up on this or not, but one of us is an optimist, and the other one of us would be
an engineer by
a
trade.
bit more on the skeptical side. One thing that Adam and I have been working on this since 2011, and essentially both of us have been living under the poverty level since then. We have 7 kids between our 2 families. So that's one little messy aspect of this whole endeavor. But it's also, like we were talking before we started recording, just about, I think there's a false sense of security out there in the marketplace where like, I'm set, I have a job, it's secure. And so I think people start to inflate their lifestyles to match that supposed security. So the one, bright side of all this skepticism is that, I believe in downward mobility, and I feel like there are many forms of wealth. And if you can make it work on very little money, then you can free yourself up to do crazy stuff like this.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, because you have the freedom to be creative.
That's right.
When you don't have the burden of,
But I do think that one of the good aspects of our partnership is that Adam hits it from one side, I hit it from the other, and generally we fall somewhere in between.
That's true.
I've heard somebody, I think it was a friend of her mom, and she said they, a good relationship, they round out each other's edges, kind of just those sharp edges. It's a good partnership.
Yeah,
you bet. We both have pretty sharp edges that they've been chiseled a little bit.
We know nothing about that.
Nothing
as
at
all. Because I feel like there's some grace in that, and not to get overly spiritual or fluffy, but I think there's some really beauty in that exchange of like, I have frontal lobe issues, you have science back. You know what I mean? Because I feel like to be an entrepreneur, to kind of go off on your own way, it means that somehow, and this is like an Emerson talking about a little bit older, authors, thinkers, transcendentalists, but like to believe your own truth. And that what's true for you is true for everyone. That's like genius. And I'm like, well, is it? But I feel like as an entrepreneur, like that you kind of have to believe that you have a formula.
Yes.
And that's scary because it means that there's some supposing that you're right, which isn't necessarily.
That is way outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I come from a point of view that, and I'm not necessarily right, but I have something valuable to share.
And you do, because we've tasted the multiple creations from Adam, and beautiful is one word, but they're just, it's quality, top notch.
Awesome.
Delicious.
What advice would you give to people who want to kind of break out from their cush position, their low level position that may not be so cush, but they want to kind of strike out and do their own thing?
The first thing I would, and I do that periodically, I have friends that send me college grads or college dropouts that I think this is number 7 or 8 business I've started. And so they look at me as somebody that has answers. Maybe I'm the opposite guy because I've started so many that I should not have started so many. Maybe the first one should have been successful, and that would have been proof enough. But anyway, so I have people that send young kids my way, and they ask advice like, what should I do? What should I prepare myself for? And the first thing I say is become an expert on something. Like really know what it is that you plan to strike out and do, and understand the market as well as what you are going to offer it. And so don't be so blind to be ideological and assume that because you love it, everybody's going to love it. And so knowledge of whatever you're going to start out on is so important. And then there has to be a passion to back it up and drive it through and to execute. And then I totally recommend looking for somebody that offers skill sets that you do not have. And so a balance. And Tim is that for me. In previous businesses, I didn't have that. And so I had to hire those people, and they were not long-term partners, and they weren't as stable because they weren't as committed to the project. And so I was excited to find Tim and a completely different skill set and background and a way to process information. I'm maybe more artistic, not to say that Tim isn't, but I come at it from a very optimistic, let's figure it out kind of a way, and Tim wants to process it even before we start. I'm gonna process it after I've finished.
and learned and spent
Yeah.
some money trying to figure out how to make it work.
So the collaboration is essential for my personality type, but I think everybody has their weaknesses and their strengths, and knowing those and filling those gaps is essential to success. And then lastly, of course, capital. There's no way to pull off a business in a city as competitive as this without having resources, deep resources. And for a lot of people, it's business acumen that they lack. So you have to find a capital partner that doesn't just give you money, but strategy.
Right.
And so if it's your first business, you'll probably need strategy and money in equal parts. If it's your 8th business, maybe you need less strategy, more money. And so add some zeros to your plan as well, because bad stuff happens. Bad stuff happens. And so you have to plan accordingly.
Any thoughts, Tim?
Yeah, what he said.
That. Mic drop.
That's funny.
No, I think there's value in finding a partner that complements you and rounds out the edges, and like I just said, I think freeing yourself up to being able to take risks. I hear a lot of people that want to start a brewery, want to start a brew pub. There's software engineers making $120,000 a year right now, and they've structured their lives around that, and that's not really going to work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's the what you really desire. You have to align those with a realistic expectation. So do you desire a business, or do you desire a comfortable life? And so if you desire the comfortable life, a startup is not your thing. That's the corporate desk that is going to offer very little satisfaction, but it's going to give you a comfortable place to land. And that, unfortunately, is where all too many Americans find themselves.
Yeah. It's like piercing through my heart right now for those listening. Well, and then it's also not for everybody, right? Because you do have to be a little okay with being uncomfortable. And I think one year, not too in a distant past, I did my taxes and I'm like, I make what? That's like nothing. When you put it all on paper and it's just like, yeah, that sounds like it makes sense. But then when you kind of dial in, it's just like, wow, you take a pay cut. And even though your life is more flexible and more meaningful, it isn't what it used to be in terms of finances. So that's not for everybody, that comfort level.
Right. Yes. And of course, it puts a stress on any home life that you have. I have 4 kids, a wife of soon to be 19 years, and we've gone through the ups of income and the downs of no income, and it can collapse or strengthen a relationship at home too.
So on your 8th venture, how has that been as a couple, kind of getting through the ups and downs?
She's numb.
Hey, she's a keeper then.
Yeah, she's a keeper.
She's not going anywhere.
Very supportive, and I would say that was 10 years ago. Some light bulbs went on in her head that more money doesn't equate into happiness, and my work travels and more commitments on the road, they just didn't bring value to the home and my home life. And so shifting gears, downsizing, as Tim spoke to, the downward mobility, we did that in grand scale, and I've never been happier. Of course, the stark fear that are your dreams at night instead of hopes and dreams. They're just fears. You wake up at 2:00 in the morning thinking about all the things that you didn't do, can't do because you don't have the working capital, the exploding cans in the warehouse, all those things you just have to embrace and put a plan. And I'd say that's when the deepness of your team, the 4 or 5 or 6 of you, needs to start sharing the weight. Otherwise, you'll find yourself bitter and frustrated that you're the only one dealing with it.
How come everybody else is sleeping?
Yeah, right. That's not me. I don't feel that way at all, Tim. Jerk.
So you sleep well, Tim?
Sometimes.
I've done my job. He doesn't sleep anymore.
It could be because he's planned it out, right?
Yeah.
So before he starts, there's a strategy and a plan, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in not looking at any electronics after 9 p.m.
Ooh, that would change everything.
Yes. That's a big help.
Wow.
We've started, this is more information than anyone needs to know, but we've started going to bed listening to the Netflix baking show, like the British baking show. There's something about British voices at night. They're so calming. I also feel like my English gets better. Anyway, I don't sleep that well at night, so I understand the frustrations that you feel, Adam. Not so much Tim, but you. Question on raising kids from the startup life. You said you have 7 kids between the 2 of you. What does that look like when you're talking about grades or jobs or hard work?
Oh, that's good.
So
You should see his eyes. It was priceless. They were dancing.
So we have 3 kids, 2, 7, and 9. The older 2 are being homeschooled at the moment, so my wife's staying home with them. Yep. And they're doing some really cool stuff, like they're into algebra and memorizing poetry, Shakespeare,
The 7 and 9 year old.
Yates.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they're doing some really amazing stuff. So
And instead of the microbrewery, they're doing kombucha.
Kombucha's happening at home. Water kefir, lots of fermentations going on. I got them. We have a little garden. I have put them on snail patrol all day.
Really?
We have lots of snails up in Brentwood. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, Adam and I talk about this. Like, I don't even know what college is going to look like, in 9 years when the 9-year-olds get into there. But I do feel like, so we have a couple companies between the 2 of us, and I think that our goal is to have a company for each of the 7 kids to run by the time they get up there.
3 more to go.
Yep. So
just more of an independent,
independent. Yeah. I mean, so there's a movement called unschooling. We're not quite there. This is more of like a postmodern approach to what's called the Charlotte Mason educational philosophy, originated in Britain.
Like Captain Fantastic.
I don't know that.
No.
You should see that.
Well, it's like city school. Well,
Okay.
the school that the kids are
It's city school
Yeah.
at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think, to succeed in the future marketplaces, you just have to be flexible. You have to be smart. You have to be hardworking.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to get smartphones for a long, long time.
Good.
So I kind of feel bad for them at some point.
But they're under peer pressure.
I was
Yeah.
raised by Saved by the Bell and then Simpsons and Seinfeld.
Zach.
Zach Attack.
Slater. AC Slater.
That's right.
Screech.
Jesse Spano.
Yeah.
So, I just think back to my childhood and like at public school in San Antonio, lots of TV. I graduated at the top of my class somehow. And I don't know. Like, it's just so weird. Like, so I guess my wife and I are just trying to set our kids up as best as we can. But they are like the nerds that I made fun of growing up.
And now they seem so smart, right? There's
Yeah.
people that were just in the zone doing their own thing. Oh my God, what would it have been like to be in them? What about you, Adam?
Wow. So we did the homeschooling thing as well, and discovered that our first child had dyslexia and really struggled with homeschooling and in reaching her and teaching her. And so we reached out and found City School we referenced earlier. It's a small Christian school in South Austin. And that became a solution for what Tim has described as happening in his home. And I would say that that's been instrumental in giving me a sense of rest to have a place like that, and I can sink myself into work and not be worried about what they might be missing out on. They're getting all that Tim is able to give his kids, but in a smaller school, classroom size of about 9 or 10. And I like them being plugged into a school like that, and then also being a part of the things that, witnessing what I'm creating and the work that I'm doing, and coming to the brewery and seeing fermentation and seeing the bar and seeing a celebration of our tasting room, a chance to reflect on the accomplishments of the week and the friends that you haven't seen in a month, a place to bring your friends together and celebrate their life as well. And I love having them come and experience that with me and find friends. My friends bring their kids and they play together outside, and that just seems amazing. And I think at least 2 of my children have got the entrepreneur bug because of that. They want to create. Anytime I pickle things at home, I have one on my hip, pickling, gardening, snail patrol, all that stuff. And then I have one that when I'm at the brewery doesn't leave my side, wants to watch me pour beer, clean glassware, talk about what's in the fermenters, how long it takes. We make water kefir and kombucha at home as well. And so I think that college might not be a fit for everybody. It wasn't for me. And I don't think it'll be for probably 2 of my children as well. And, we have 3 businesses, soon to be 4 businesses, and I have one more in my mind that would make it 5 for Tim and I. And, maybe there'll be 5 that will run the companies in 10 or 15 years.
That's incredible. So we've talked about one business. What are the other 2, just for the benefit of those listening?
The first business that we started actually making money in a product was a pickle company. It's Hat Creek Provisions, soon to be called Hat Creek Probiotics. And that is going nationwide with a couple of major retailers. And it's fermented, never cooked, probiotic, all natural, amazing pickles and sauerkraut and kimchi and okra and probiotic beverages and
They're amazing.
super healthy, an amazing lifestyle product, but one that tastes great too. It adds to both the plate and palate and your health. Tim talked me into Texas sake.
That's amazing.
Well, isn't that winning awards?
It is
Award-winning and
award-winning Texas
handcrafted.
sake. You
But
heard it here.
Where can you find it?
We don't sell it. I mean, should we sell the product?
Yes,
it's just so
it's
good we
gotta
keep
be
it
an
all.
award.
We're big on the scarcity play.
Okay.
Luxury.
It's working.
No,
because
Whole Foods,
Okay.
HEBs,
It's
select
amazing.
HEBs.
London.
London.
Yeah, London.
We just shipped the
Nice.
pallet to London. Inroads into Toronto as well, and looking for another distributor to help us in new markets for that product.
But yeah, and I mean, the tap room is open Fridays and Saturdays. It's in the middle of town. It's right behind Bookwomen off North Lamar. I mean, you've driven past it
Really? Okay.
a million times. You just never knew it was there.
That was there.
So it's kind of a strange land approach to sake.
Envision where Bookwomen would throw their trash away, and that we're right next door to that in the back.
What's in the trash?
And we have some very colorful neighbors there. So
Yeah,
it's
you can't. This is a family show too.
That's right. No, just
Is
go get some sake on the weekends. Wander around the parking lot, take in the sights.
It is delicious. You have to.
It is wonderful.
To get you some.
And then we have some top secret products that we're working on that are part of fermentation and beverage world, and we've gotten through the R&D on one of them, and it should be on the shelf in the next 6 months or so. Kim, I would love you to talk about my 6 months windows.
Yeah. So for Adam, everything is 6 months out.
Right. That's true.
Kind of on a rotating basis. So
It's
anytime
6
you
months
ask
from
him,
the moment that I say it.
Make it so.
Yes, make it so. So that's going to be an exciting one for us, and possibly the biggest play for us. And then there's one that will tag onto that that I'm super excited about. I feel like there's a big gap in the market in that one as well.
So from a gap filling perspective, you obviously have a passion for fermentation. You've mastered a process. The quality of products that I've been able to taste through Sunday have been incredible. Is it about gap filling, or is it about interest plus gap filling? What do you?
Well, certainly interest. So as it sits now, a great sort of way to think about how interest and gap fill come together is sake. The sake we make is beautiful, and we looked on the shelf and went through a conference and heard that fruited beverages are exploding through the roof. And I love fruited beverages. Some of my favorite beers are Framboise. They're Belgian fermented, very dessert forward. And so sake will infuse some local peaches, and we'll release a peach sake soon. And so that is a gap filling thing that I'm passionate about. Tim, maybe not so much on the fruit, but it's where the market is at, and I'm excited about releasing that product. And then looking beyond what the shelves are missing, but what sort of comes out of sake is a product called sochu, and it's a distilled rice wine, Korean by background, and it is amazing. It's like really clean Scotch or bourbon that's just delicate and floral and nutty.
Where are you doing tasting for these new inventions?
If you go to the sake Akira,
Right.
you'll get a chance to experience the oak and the sake cocktails and the amazing sake tonics and the sake aritas. All those things are being created there. And then if you get to know Jeff, our Toji, who's the brewmaster there, he might pull out some sochu in the back and share it with you.
Noted.
It's so delicious. And then the other fermented things are part of Tim and I's life. We ferment things and eat them at home, drink them at home, share them with the kids for soda replacements, for immune boosts, for probiotic intake. And I could talk about why that came in my life, but it's about health. Mm-hmm. And those, I feel like there's something missing, like there was something missing in the beer world. Mm-hmm. Strangeland filled a need, and what we saw was missing in the marketplace. Our kombucha will do the same.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that somehow both of us have a propensity to find the gaps. Like that's just where we're naturally oriented in terms of whatever product you're talking about. So I think that we've just embraced that, and I think that makes what we're doing compelling, because people are like, oh, you're doing that. That's interesting.
Well, I feel like there's two different, and I spend a lot of time in the Bay, and so there's a whole different mentality when you talk about startups or starting your own business, whatever it may be, not necessarily affiliated with tech. And it's not a get rich quick. It's just, this is an avenue that the only way you can really make some real money is to have a stake in it or to make it your own. It's like, well, that's a look. But I feel like what you're trying to do with your artisan product, because it is artisan products, it's about the quality. It's about understanding that here's the market, they're lacking this, we can create that through our methods and techniques. So I feel like it's a little different, and I wonder how much of that is the Austin community, because I feel like Austin and its history and just the kind of people it attracts, even now, they want to do it differently. So how does that influence kind of your ambition, this place?
That's a good question. I've never looked at it through that lens. Not me as a person. It hasn't influenced that. I was born like that. I was the nerd listening to the music that nobody else was listening to. Or
what kind of music?
Well, back in the day, it was punk, and in southern Minnesota,
like New York Dolls.
Yeah, no man, I was in the California punk scene too.
Okay.
So, and the Brit stuff, and that wasn't a part of what was happening where I grew up. And then I was the nerd, that kid that Tim was describing. Poetry was something I fell in love with early on, and writing, and so I'm not looking to what everybody else is doing. It just doesn't resonate with me as deep as something new. But I would say that being in a community like Austin, where it embraces new rapidly, mm-hmm. and values that, it maybe gives me a sense of freedom to present that, knowing it will be received. And so that I've never given that much thought, but I feel like that's true.
I feel like there's a respect for the vulnerability of kind of branching out and trying your own thing, and the support. I got trapped here during Hurricane Sandy after I left my firm, and it's like I started the business because of friends literally sitting me down with other friends to be introduced and kind of have conversations about what they were doing. So I feel like it is an abnormally supportive community, even though it has grown, and there are elements of LA or San Francisco or New York that are kind of moving here, but I feel like the core of what Austin is and what it attracts is people who are seeking the same. And I think it makes it different. I don't know if you feel that way, Tim.
I do. I think that there's a vibrancy to Austin. Again, as a skeptic, I would say there's a lot of hype as well. But I think we have a very open market. People are very open to new things, and people are doing a lot of really cool things. So I feel very fortunate to be here, to be kind of in this space and allowed to do the crazy stuff that we're doing.
We talked a little bit about, and I just have a few more questions, the unglamorous, kind of, and glorious, right? So the what do we call it? Glorious? Because it is gory and joyous. What are some of the most unglamorous or gory moments that you've experienced as entrepreneurs, as dream makers?
For me, I was the face, and in some way am the face of the business. Tim likes to hide in the corner and make the beer, and as soon as the bar opens up, he scoots out the back door and vapors, and everyone's like, "Where'd Tim go?" Like, yeah, he does that. But as the face, there's this unglorious job of when there is a soft recall. You're pulling product off the shelf as fast as you can because it may explode. And so that's like driving to every store, buying all the stuff that is that particular batch off the shelf, and talking with the buyers and describing, what they should be looking for, the problems that we're experiencing. And that is taxing on the spirit. It's like you question what you're doing as a company and your approach, and is this a viable path that we're on? And then simple little things like running your staff so tight because of payroll is just going to be hard to make. So just before the bars open, my hand's been in a toilet, cleaning the toilet in the corners, and changing trash cans out and mopping the floor and squeegeeing the floor. And then when the bar closes, I do that again. And I've served 500, 700, 800 beers that night in between, and talked to 500 people, and then do it again the next day.
That's intense. How much of that feels like, sometimes we joke, it feels like a performance? Like there's what everybody gets, then there's what you deal with behind the scenes. Yeah. And it's exhausting. It
is exhausting. That's hosting. I grew up in a very host-forward family. My mom, my grandma were just wonderful hosts. And that's maybe from the era that they were raised in, where the women did the work in the kitchen. I did not have a father in the home, so I was raised by a pack of women. So that's my model. That's what I learned, and that's the value that was put on me. And so I feel like I'm honoring my family's tradition of hosting well with those that come to my place of business.
That's lovely.
That's beautiful.
What about you, Tim? The gory.
So on the gory side, I mean, so we run very lean companies. There's no HR department. There's no buffer between the owners, operators, and the guys and gals that we're employing. So this, Adam, I think, has a more natural ability to deal with people. It's harder for me dealing with people. I'm a reclusive engineer type. So there's anytime you're dealing with a couple different people, like, it's just messy, or it can be, at least. But then also, I mean, very literally, product going bad. I mean, we've had a couple things, like in the development of the pickle company. Adam forgot to mention this, but we actually started the pickle company in the bowels of the UT football stadium.
Make it go away.
And
how does that work?
Yeah, how does that work?
It did not.
Good question. But for example, first we tried a couple things with the pickles, on making a pound or two here or there. Everything was going good. We're like, okay, let's scale it to, I don't know, 500 pounds. What could go wrong with that? So let's just say, like, it was less than a success. And so now you have 500 pounds and 500 gallons of rotting cucumber mass in a facility that's not set up to deal with stuff like that, at least easily, or at least that we knew of.
You're wheeling product down and through the bowels of the UT stadium, past the cheerleaders practicing, past the football athletes, and into the basement, and scooping bucket at a time into the trash can.
Oh my goodness!
Unfortunately, I was tied up at that moment.
Yes.
Somehow this fell to Adam only. And then, we've had sauerkraut experiences where, we're dumping hundreds of pounds of rotted cabbage. But, so that's the gory right there, like that. But from that, it's like we got our processes cleaned up. We learned tons, and you can only learn those things by doing it, by going through that. And I did want to share, like, when things like that happen, my natural inclination is to just, like, stop, kind of freak out internally, pretend, and not pretend, but just, like, I never want to go back there again. And, like, I looked at Adam, like, what are we going to do? He's like, make more sauerkraut.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But what if it doesn't work? Doesn't matter. You still got to make it. Yeah. We have to figure this out. So.
And you have perfected that process, at least in my opinion.
I think we have. I've not tasted better sauerkraut, and that's a heritage as well. Grandma preserved in the root cellar that my grandfather built for her, in the basement of the house that he built for her, and they just preserved all the gardening work of the summer through fermentation. We didn't call it fermentation; you just called it preserving. And you'd go just peel off sauerkraut and pickles and beets out of the root cellar, serving at a time.
Wow.
And it's essentially her process, her approach carried forward, and Tim's approach cleaned it up and made it scalable. And I love the flavor.
So is this somewhat of a homage to the women that raised you?
Yeah, I'm really
on International Women's Month?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's Women's Month.
It worked out.
So yes, my grandmother, if I talk much, I won't be able to talk much at all about her. She was the hero in my life, and my mother as well. And they instilled a work ethic in me, and a desire to create and honor those that you're sharing it with by what you've created. And so, yeah, I'd definitely say that.
I love that. And I feel like there's so much that you don't get. And that's one of the reasons I think I was even convinced to do this, is because like there's some beautiful stories behind brands that we love, or brands that we purchase, or brands that we overlook. And it's just, if you just knew more, not different than people, if you knew more about where they're coming from or what their intentions are, it's disarming, and it makes you want to try it. It makes you want to celebrate it. It makes you want to go out and buy it and advocate for it. So we believe in your product, obviously, and now just knowing more about your story, it's that much more. And I think it's funny that you're honoring the women in your life by creating beer that doesn't make women bloat, which is amazing. Full circle.
Full circle.
But it is, you are the creator of beautiful products, and for 3 businesses, and I can't wait to see what you do with the next 4. So thank you for joining
Awesome.
us.
Thanks for having us.